Hello and welcome to Logan Random Aquascaping. My name is Logan and today I have a very special guest on my channel. It's my really good friend and roommate, Mal.
Hi.
How you doing, Mal?
Good, thanks for having me on your channel.
Yeah, welcome to the channel. So today Mal and I are embarking on a really cool project. We moved into this place in Portland, Oregon a few months ago, and I've been setting up my aquascapes, and she told me that she wanted to set something up for her room. Like me, she's self-employed, so she works out of her room/office a lot, and she told me that she wanted a little nano aquascape to kind of enhance the room. So I just so happen to have a spare UNS 5N lying around, so today we're gonna be putting that together, talking about kind of what she wants to do and scaping it. So Mal, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you want to do with your layout?
Yeah, so I love the tanks that you keep. I've seen you do it for years, and so I'm excited to bring a little bit of color and that beauty into my space, in my office, my room. So I'm excited because I really want to get a betta fish.
Okay.
So I want a little betta fish as my little tank.
All right, and what specifically about the betta draws you in? Why a betta?
I just think they're so beautiful and they're just so majestic, and you can get so many different colors and variations, and then you see them in the pet store and they're in these tiny little bowls and these little plastic containers. I want to rescue one.
It is unfortunate that within this hobby there is a lot of betta abuse. A lot of people go into the hobby without doing any sort of research. They go to the store, they see this beautiful vibrant fish, they keep it in the wrong parameters, and unfortunately the fish perishes, after a few weeks or a few months. So we can definitely do a betta tank right. And if you're drawn to the beauty and the color of a betta, I think a really nice aquascape is just gonna bring that out and showcase it. So this is our chance to really give a betta a great home.
Yes.
So I think that's cool and exciting.
I'm so excited.
So when you think about keeping a betta in an aquascape, tell me about what kind of layout you have in mind.
So I immediately, when I saw the dimensions of the tank, I wanted to go with something that created some depth. So I imagined having like some columns or something in the back where you can draw your attention to maybe like a rock structure. And then I really wanted it like heavily planted in the back and then really short up front, so then I could have a lot of space, because I want the fish to be able to swim around. It's not a huge tank, but it's enough so that they can have the plants if it wants to go in the plants, and it also has that free roam to swim.
We have a real reverence for the fish in aquascaping, and even though the focus is on the plants and the layout, the care of the fish is very, very important to us. So I think a layout like that is gonna work because a betta does have some special needs compared to your typical nano fish. It doesn't like too much flow, it doesn't want to be blown around like crazy. It likes some free space for swimming. It does like some greenery to, occasionally hide under. And it needs warmer temperatures. So most of us keep bettas around like 80 degrees Fahrenheit when we're doing it right. If you keep a betta at a lower temperature, like 73 to 76, it's just gonna be really lethargic and it's gonna be more prone to disease. So I think by giving it some free open space up front and having the emphasis of the plants in the back like you're describing is gonna really work. And we just have to make sure we pick plants that are gonna be okay at a slightly higher temperature. So we'll do some research.
Okay, yeah.
So tell me, what about aquascaping excites you the most?
I've seen you do it for years, and I just think it's very beautiful. And I think that what inspires me the most is putting it together myself and creating something myself. So kind of emulating nature and what you see outside and bringing it into a space that you can kind of recreate it and make it look natural. And so it's like art and it's like being creative. And so that's what really excites me the most. Yeah, I can't say I'm looking like really forward to the maintenance, but I still want to get good at doing this and get the practice in, because I want to have tanks throughout my life, and so I want to learn how to do it right.
So would you say it's the maintenance that intimidates you the most about the hobby?
Yeah, that and the fact that I don't speak Latin. Mr. Ficidens Montana and Storagine Repens and cryptocurrency.
We all learn a little bit of Latin by the first few months of aquascaping, but fortunately there's a lot of easy to remember common names and plants.
Some of them, but yeah.
Some of them, yeah.
Most of them are a mouthful.
There's some crazy ones out there. So now that we have got a good plan, what do you say we pick out some hardscape and get to playing with the layout?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, let's do it.
So I started out with sprinkling some ADA additives to the bottom of the tank before I put any soil in. I started out first putting Bacter 100 and Tourmaline BC. And so basically what these additives do is they create optimal soil conditions to let the beneficial bacteria thrive. So next I used these nutrient capsules right on top of the ADA additives. The nutrient capsules come with the soil. So I added about 1/3 of the bag for my small nano tank and I spread them evenly right throughout the tank before I put the soil on top. So right after the nutrient capsules, I added all of the ADA soil. I started off adding a lot of the soil to the back of the tank to create depth because I really wanted the back of the tank to be elevated to kind of make it look more spacious, also to give the front of the tank a lot of space for the betta to swim. So I added a lot in the very back of the tank and then I slowly sloped it so that I had about 1 inch to work with in the front so I could be able to plant some of the carpeting plants that I wanted to plant. So once I scooped all of the soil in and kind of got it where I needed it and wanted it to be, I used my hand and I also used that flat scraper to kind of move the soil and have it slope really nicely. So it was about 1 inch at the bottom until it sloped all the way up in the back so it'd have enough room to prop on my hardscape. So next up was the hardscape. I knew in my mind what I wanted to do and I also had pre-selected the rocks I was going to use. So I was going to use these 2 rocks to kind of have columns that stood out in the back. So I took the first rock and I was experimenting with it and kind of deciding where it should go, and I was placing it and using my hands and angles to kind of work it out. And then I would end up going away from the tank and looking at it from like a broader perspective to kind of see what worked and what didn't, and I ended up making a lot of adjustments. I ended up using the opposite side of the rock that I had intended because once I got them in the tank, I realized that the back of the rock had actual beautiful little striations and details that I hadn't previously noticed, so it took me to actually put the rock in the tank for me to see what side was better and kind of what flowed and worked better. It was kind of an intuitive thing. So once I got the first rock in and the second rock, I kind of worked around with the kind of synchronicity between the two, and I allowed them to come together and kind of maybe meet at a focal point so you can see the striations kind of meeting together at a certain point in order for it to create depth, but also to make it look very natural. So once I got the rocks in place, I realized I wanted to elevate one a little bit, so I took a step back and looked at it, and then Logan showed me this trick where I ended up taking the top of the rock, wiggling it a little bit and raising it so it was supported by the soil, and it ended up showing a lot more of that striation and the bottom part of the rock that had some really valuable texture that you could see now that I elevated it a little bit. I think that the formation that I ended up having both rocks in, I'm very happy with it, and I think it looks really beautiful, and I think once all of the plants are in there, it's gonna look really cool. It's gonna be kind of what I envisioned, but even better maybe.
All right, so now that the hardscape is complete, we had to place a plant order with Boost Plant and wait a few days for them to arrive. So 1 week has gone by, and now that we have all the plants, we're excited to get started with the planting. So we started in the foreground and worked our way all the way to the back. And Mal and I kind of discussed the general plan for planting. Obviously, taller plants in the back, small compact plants in the front. Once we finished discussing the plan and the strategy, she did all the planting and I was just able to operate the cameras. So she started up front with Hemianthus Cuba, which is really, really beautiful, bright green, easy carpeting plant. Now it's usually listed as advanced, but in my opinion, as long as you have good CO2, good circulation, and the tank doesn't get too warm, it's actually one of the easier carpeting plants I've grown. So that should look absolutely beautiful. And then that's gonna transition into Eleocharis pusilla. And Mal kind of worked that in the foreground to transition us out of the Cuba into the hair grass. So you'll see in some spots she worked in some Eleocharis in between the Cuba, so it'll kind of naturally grow in. And then sort of the rear foreground section is all Eleocharis. So we should get kind of a natural wild look with that. And eventually the Eleocharis will probably work its way quite a bit into the Cuba, but that's okay. It's kind of cool to see your aquascape evolve and, you know, get more wild as it goes on. So depending on how she decides to maintain the tank, that can be either kept really short and clean and well manicured, or it can be allowed to grow really wild. Okay, moving on to the Midground, Mal started with Alternanthera rhynickii mini, which is one of my favorite red plants. It's super duper easy to grow. When I get it from tissue culture, I do tend to get some melting with it, but it just comes in absolutely beautiful and it always bounces back really, really nice. So we'll see how it works with this tank, but it's a really nice contrast and color from the Cuba and the Eleocharis and the Storagini repens. So Mal strategically placed 4 kind of highlights of it on either side of the tank. And one really great tip I learned from my good friend Yuri's was when you have a highlight like that, it's usually good to have it on both sides of the tank. So it doesn't necessarily have to be symmetrical, but usually a highlight should occur not just in a single place. So Mal set up those 4 spots, and I think she chose really good positioning for them. And then next we have the Storagini repens. And again, that's a nice, really bright green plant, and it's amazing for the midground. In a larger tank, you could also use it for the foreground, but it's one of my favorite transitioning plants going from the foreground to the background. So she's got that along the rocks, kind of bordering it. And we only had so much, but it's so easy to propagate. It's a stem plant. So once it grows a little bit tall, you could just hack off the top and then replant that if you want to spread it out. And once the midground was complete, that takes us to the background. And for the background, we kept it super simple. Mal wanted sort of a wild, overgrown look in the back with a shorter front. So we went with Rotala green, all-time classic. It can be allowed to grow wild or trimmed down and manicured for a hedge-like look. So we planted a couple cups of that behind each rock, and it's a super fast grower, so it's gonna help fight the algae, give the betta a little bit of coverage if it wants it, and just provide a really beautiful bright green look that will further contrast from the Alternanthera. So that's about it for the planting. Once we were done planting, we took a step back, made sure that everything was looking good, and we ended up filling in a little bit more of the Eleocharis because, you know, we divided up into the small portions, and I had a few extra cups for one of my builds. So filled that in a little bit, took a step back, and things were looking really beautiful. So we just dry started it for a few days. So with that, you just want to spray, and you always want to spray between plantings too, especially if it's going to take you a few hours. So spray just to the point where you start to see little beads of water coming down into the soil. You don't want any puddles, you don't want any sitting water, and then every day you'll kind of air it out and open the saran wrap a little bit. All right, so now that we're done with the planting, it's time to talk a little bit about the equipment we're gonna use in the tank, as well as what the maintenance is gonna look like for the next few weeks. So in terms of filtration, we've got the OASE Biomaster Thermo 250. This has a built-in heater, which is really important for the betta. We have to keep the betta's temperature at around 25 Celsius, around 80 Fahrenheit, or it'll just be really lethargic and kind of slowly perish. So it's really important that we keep that constant heat, and we've got more than adequate turnover and circulation. So we'll probably end up turning down the flow on that filter quite a bit. Now, here's something that's also really important for the betta. It doesn't like being pushed around by like a really strong current or flow. So we're gonna use a spin pipe, which is gonna take the outflow of the filtration, kind of spin it around a little bit, and then, you know, make it less impactful so it's not getting jetted around. And then we'll just use a regular inflow. So in terms of CO2, I've got a paintball cylinder for use. So that should last you a few months. I've got a spare full one lying around, so it'll just be a matter of swapping it out. Cheap little regulator, and then we've got the beautiful AQUARIO tiny diffuser. So in a small tank like this, you want to really minimize the equipment. So I found the smallest diffuser I could on the market. It'll create teeny tiny little bubbles that'll get distributed around the tank and just do a really good job, you know, distributing the CO2. All right, let's talk about your favorite part, the maintenance. Now, you tell me, what do you think you're gonna be doing the next few weeks in terms of water changes? You've seen me set up a few tanks. I'm curious what you've learned.
You have to do it every day for the first week, and then every other for the second, and then it goes to like twice a week eventually. and then you can do it once a week.
You've got it down perfectly. That's the idea. So because we're using ADA Amazonia soil, it's really, really high quality soil, but in the beginning of its life cycle, it releases ammonia. Good for the plants, not so good for the livestock. So you're gonna be doing those daily water changes the first week to dilute that, and we won't introduce the Betta for a few weeks because we don't want to expose it to any sort of ammonia.
And we have to find the perfect one.
That's exactly right. And we have to find the perfect one and not rush things, not impulse buy anything. So by the time we're ready to add the Betta, after the holidays, maybe about 4 or 5 weeks in, we'll be done with those water changes, and then you'll be down to just 1 weekly water change, which should be cake. You'll have to trim the tank every few weeks because you have Rotala's in there, but depending on the type of look you want, you can either do that every couple weeks or less if you want more of that wild, untamed
I
look.
do want it to be a little bit more overgrown.
So you could let it go for a while and then the maintenance won't be that bad. So how are you feeling about this whole process? Are you excited? Are you intimidated? Give me your closing thoughts.
I'm really excited, and I'm glad I got to show you what my vision was, because articulation isn't my specialty, but I did get it all planned out and planted the way that I wanted to. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'm just excited to see it grow in.
Me too. I think this is gonna be a really, really beautiful tank, and the planting is really cool, but once we get that Betta in, all the focus is gonna be on the Betta, and the plants are just gonna provide a really beautiful natural backdrop for it. So thank you so much for watching, guys. We really appreciate you sticking around for this longer video. If you're a beginner, we'd love to hear from you what your first scaping experience is like. And go ahead and drop me a comment below and let me know what type of Betta you think we should add to this tank. I've seen so many cool ones on the market lately, but in terms of knowing what kind of breeds and coloration and tail types, I'm a little bit out of the loop. So go ahead and drop a link or the type of the Betta, and we'll take a look at it.
And I really want a yellow one. Something with yellow.
Okay, maybe something with yellow. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.